Hello everybody, in this screencast we're going to look at buttons. We focus on buttons because they have a very simple event handling event handler that needs to be set up, which is mainly to handle the on-click. So we look at buttons. So let's delete this the layout that we used before. Alright, so I selected it and deleted it, and probably I have to go to in the code and just delete also the other stuff that we had. So here we are. Yes, good. Okay, so now let's add some buttons. So add a button. This is button number 1. Add button number 2. 2 buttons. Let's do that. And basically I'll just make it center the screen. Here it is. And set up maybe a top constraint, and then similarly this one is under this one, and similarly it's like this. Alright, and then we will make it occupy the whole screen. Here it is, or hold width. Here it is. Maybe add some padding between them, or a margin between them. And then this is button. We'll call it, for example, click, or maybe we call it button 1, right? And the other one is gonna be called button 2, right? Just for sake of experiment. Button 2, right? So these are the 2 buttons. We set up their IDs. This is gonna be button 1, right? Yes. And then this one is gonna be button 2, right? Okay, so we have set up these buttons. We give them IDs, and then we go back to the code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an OnClickListener. So for me to set up an OnClickListener, I have to retrieve that button. Find view by ID r.id dot button 1, right? That's button 1. I could say dot set OnClickListener. All right, and you could see the OnClickListener is going to take an OnClickListener, an instance of an OnClickListener. So how do I do that? Let's say new OnClickListener, and I will press enter, and it automatically generates. This is an implementation of an interface. This OnClickListener is an interface. That's an implementation of that interface. So this is an anonymous class. So basically there's an onClick. I'll do log d, and I'm going to press onClick button 1, right? So that's when you click on button 1, it's going to do that. So it's going to print to the log. All right, so let's look at logcat filtering the demo with the tag is called demo. Now when I click on button 1, you see what's happening. It's showing in the log clicked on button 1. So basically it's very straightforward. So basically all what we will do is we will find the button, find view by ID, and then we will set an OnClickListener. And let's do the same thing for button 2. Find view by ID r.id dot button 2. Here it is. Dot set OnClickListener, new OnClickListener, and I press enter. See, I didn't type much, right? And the same story here, log d, and I'm saying going to say button 2, right? And I'm gonna run it. So basically when you click on button 1, here it is, button 1, it's showing button 1 being clicked, and then you click on button 2, it's showing button 2 being clicked, because that's the log message that we are having. And it's very straightforward. So basically if you look at the onClick method, you will see that it sends the view that actually was clicked as a parameter. The view that was clicked as a parameter. And here you are doing the log just to print the message. So that's one approach. One approach is to go in and set up the OnClickListener using an anonymous class. And the other approach is maybe to implement the OnClickListener at the activity level, because it's an interface. So basically I could go here, I could say implements view.onClickListener, right? The OnClickListener. So I could say that the main activity implements that interface, right? And then you hover over, and it will add. You will implement the missing methods, right? So if you hover over here, and basically you could say code implement methods, and the missing method is the onClick method, right? You click OK, and basically here is the onClick method, and the code is not the IDE now is happy, right? So now instead of doing it like this, we're going to implement the OnClicknesser at the activity level, right? So basically now I need to find view ID r.id dot button 1, right? And then I will say set OnClicknesser to this, meaning because this is the main activity, and the main activity implements that interface. So that's why I could do this, right? Similarly, I'll do the same thing. Find view by ID r.id dot button 2, dot set OnClickNistener to this. So basically I could tell it both of them are going to point to the same OnClickListener, and it's done at the activity level. And then I could do log d, and I could say onClick, and we'll look at how we can identify which one was clicked. But anyhow, when you click a button, this is going, when you click any of the buttons, this one, okay, here it is, you see the onClick shows up, and the onClick shows up, and basically we have set up the OnClickListener to the activity, and the activity implements the interface, and thus the onClick is going to get called. All right, perfect. So basically now, how do we identify which one was clicked? You see, when you click, the onClick receives the view that was clicked, which is the button that was clicked. So basically we could identify them by ID, right? So you could say if v.getID, right? This is the ID, is equal to r.id dot button 1, right? So this means you click button 1, else if, right, v.getID is equal to r.id dot button 2. So that's how we could identify it. This is button 1 and this is button 2. So basically we go here, click this one, put this is when button 1 is clicked, and this is when button 1 is clicked, and this is when button 2 is clicked, right? So that's how you set up the OnClickListener. So when you run it, you can use the view, you get its ID, and you compare it to the ID that you have set up in the layout, right? So basically button 1, here it is. You see I clicked on button 1, you see button 1, button 1, button 1, click on button 2, button 2, button 2. So basically that's two approaches. Either you just implement it using an anonymous class, or you can implement it at the activity level or at a different class level, and then use that class as the listener, right? All right, so please let me know if you have any questions.